Hello everyone, Anita here and welcome to another video. As you can see, I have everything prepared for painting right now. And while you're watching me reactivating my watercolors, I would like to sneak a little bit of a self-promo thing over here. I've started a new channel called Anita's Day Off, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically a collection of videos of things I do during my days off. Whether it to be paper crafts or DIYs or just vlogs, anything really. I just decided to put it on a separate channel. So if you're interested in watching it, there's a link in the description. I would be very happy if you decided to subscribe. But now let's go back to the painting. I'm still reactivating my watercolors, but this is a perfect time to talk a little bit about the picture and what we are dealing with. So I have a A5 illustration here. It's sketched with a regular pencil actually. I think it's an H5 or H6, so very hard pencil, just for that neutral line. I have, as you can see, all my tools around me, which is just my regular watercolors, a palette, 2 cups of water, one for the dirty water, one for clean water, a few paint brushes, my white gouache, and my handy dandy heat gun, which I absolutely love. And I use this dropper for reactivating the watercolors because it makes me feel like I'm doing a science project, and it's really cool. So first of all, what I'm doing is I'm putting on some basic shade, really, just to set the tone of the painting. And I really wanted to have that kind of a sepia undertone to it, very warm. So I've wet the whole paper, and then I'm putting a few layers of watercolor in this kind of like a gradient with a center clear. And of course, in between every layer, I'm drying it and then waiting for the paper to cool. Now I still have a little bit of a seepage. The watercolor is seeping under the tape, even though I'm making sure that it's perfectly attached to the paper. It just does it recently. I've noticed that it's probably because of the weather. Can't really help that. So as you can see here, I had a little bit of an idea to put in some blue, just to break that warmth. I like to play with colors. I really like blue and brown in my undertones, just together. I mean, as in together. And so, that's my head. Sorry for that. The camera angles are really weird. I'm still getting used to my new camera. So if you see my head popping, that's I'm really sorry for that. So here I'm playing a little bit, to be honest. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. I had the idea of it to be a very dark space, but I wasn't sure exactly how dark I wanted it to be. So what I usually do in these situations, that I put in a basic layer of watercolor, just kind of playing with where I would like the shadows to be. Now I really wanted to have that circular shadow in this whole picture with a central lantern illuminating the character. And so as you can see, I'm putting a little bit of browns and blues, just kind of trying to get the feel of it. But it's not much. It's literally just a very, very thin layer of watercolor. And then I'm moving on to the background. And so I've decided, because if you haven't noticed already, these are actually books. The idea for this picture is that there is this tiny little traveler, and he is traveling through a forest of books. I thought it was an adorable idea, just, something that popped in my head while looking on my own bookshelf. So I would really like to see something like that in reality. That would be hilarious. But for now, we have only this picture, and it's fine. So I'm filling in those book shapes. These are supposed to be very old, magical books, handwritten, hand decorated. And so I wanted them to be very ornate. And I wasn't really sure what colors I wanted to stay within the color scheme. And so I really wanted to have like this olive green book. I knew I wanted to have one like that. So that's what I started with. And then I kind of went with the colors that fit with that color, and with the brown and with the blue. So that's when I started, that's when I put in the ochre yellow book, the brown. I don't even know which brown. I think there's a collection of a few browns, like a mixture. And then I went for something to break that, because I wanted the character to really stand out from the background. And so I've decided to put in a little bit of ultramarine blue in the last book so that I could pull that into the character later on. So as you can see here, I've already put in a lot of details into the books, and the reason for that is that they are really small. Those details, they're very, very hard to paint, and I have to have my head straight above the painting, and that wasn't possible with the camera. And so instead of showing you the process of every single book, I've decided it was enough to just show you the first one of them, because every single one of them follows the same pattern, where I'm just layering watercolor, layer over layer, and trying to get just different shapes out of that book cover. There wasn't really any. I would say that I wanted to have them seem like as if the cover had pressed shapes into it, but really it was just about the pattern. I wasn't really thinking about how it would work in reality. I just wanted a nice kind of magical pattern. And honestly, I was more imagining what the books are about rather than how they are constructed. For example, this one here, these are strawberries, the little shapes I'm painting right now. I mean, what kind of book, magical book, could have strawberries on it? It's just the idea of it. It was very fascinating to me. And so I was actually thinking about that through a lot of my painting process. And so I'm also showing you here how I'm lining some of those shapes. I don't really do lines on camera that often lately, but I've got some questions about it in my previous video, and so I figured, you know what, these shapes are pretty easy to line. I can show you. So pretty much every single thing follows the same rule. I'm just using a bit, either a slightly bit darker or just the same color but more concentrated of the watercolor I used in the shape, and just outlining it very carefully. And now sometimes I like the lines to be straight, sometimes I use more sketchy motions, just to sketchy as in I want them to be very uneven and just hand drawn almost, like in this case, I actually came back over the lines a few times, just trying to roughen them up, because I figured that handwritten books like this, old books like this, wouldn't have perfect, dainty lines. And so it made sense for them to be a little bit more, rough. So here I'm putting in, that's a very good example actually of how my work evolves. Because I figured after putting in the book colors that the ground, the shelf that he's walking on was just too light and I needed it to be darker. And so at the same time, I've decided to put in some of the details down of the wood grain. And as you can see, I first put them with a very, very light, the same color that the wood is. And then I'm coming back with a little bit darker shade just to build up the depth without it being too sharp, if that makes sense. I don't mind spending that extra few minutes on making the wood grain look a bit more softer. And as you can see here, that's what I meant. I'm putting in the same ultramarine blue in the character because of all the browns and warm colors that he has in the background. And I knew that the background wouldn't be necessarily lighter, just to, show the depth, because he's actually walking very close to the books. At least that's how it was in my head. And so I needed to somehow make him stand out from the background. And one way to do it, of course, is with color. And so I figured if the background actually kind of not on purpose turned out to be very warm. And so instead of using warm colors on him, I've decided to use, that blue on his robe and then the red just to have a nice contrast. And so while I'm putting in those shapes, I've also noticed that he is starting to... Oh, actually, the background is starting to kind of blend in together. And as you can see here, I've came in and darkened the spaces between the books, and I already planned to do it beforehand. But once I started to put in the little lines in the character, I was like, okay, that's the moment that you should put the background in, because it will ruin your lines afterwards if you just do it in a different order. So background first, details last. And so I'm just working here on making the character more presentable, just outlining some stuff, adding a little bit of shading. I'm mixing on the sides all the colors. That's why you see me sometimes. I was mixing on the go because at some point I've realized that I didn't want to use red for the outline of the bag. I wanted it to kind of blend in more with that dark tone, just to have the shadow more dramatic, I would say, on the lines, because I knew that I wanted to have a very nice glow around the lantern. And while I didn't want it to be very, black and white, dramatic shadows, because I'm not really into that. Sometimes, sometimes I can plan ahead too, okay? And here I had an idea that kind of popped out while I was painting, to have a bit of a shadow. And the reason for that was that he looked like he was walking on top of that bookshelf, like on top of that line. And he really wasn't. I kind of imagined him to be moving in those very large jumps, almost like, I don't know, like a flea or something. And so I wanted to have a shadow that would kind of show that he is not actually touching anything. I don't know if I actually achieved that, but I had a lot of fun painting that shadow. It's not really anything very specific, or it's just a shadow. Don't look really too close, and and you won't be disappointed. But at that point I was like, that's not very grammatically correct, but at that point I was really done with the painting, and I wanted to move on to the details. And I make usually the detailed shading with colored pencils, just because I really like the very delicate texture it gives the hot pressed watercolor paper. And so you can see me here, I have a little selection of colored pencils, and I'm shading each book one by one, just adding a little bit of depth, a little bit of definition. I'm coming back just to add a few little details. As you can see me here, soon I will be adding stripes inside those spaces in the brown book, just because I felt it was a little bit empty. And a lot of the details I'm also making with the blue pencil, just the regular pencil I've normally used for line art. I really like to use that pencil for shading as well, because it has a very, very smooth texture that leaves behind on paper. And it's because, I don't know if it's because of the very delicate, tiny lead, but it just goes into every crevice of the paper, and it makes everything so nice and smooth. I absolutely love the shadows that it leaves behind. And it's also rather transparent, so it layers beautifully. And so whenever I need a little bit of a cover up, or I want to darken the color, it's a perfect way to just do it with the blue colored pencil. So I had a lot of problem actually with that yellow book, just because the other ones, it's always harder to nicely blend or nicely add shadows on a lighter color, because colored pencils, like I've said, they leave a little bit of texture behind, and if it's too much texture, it bothers me, especially that the other books were very smooth, and it looked rather weird when there was all of a sudden in that one book a lot of texture, where the other ones were just, nice and blended. But in the end, I've managed to get it the way I wanted to. And so, and you can see me sometimes just throwing the pencils around. They're just, for some reason, pencils, especially when I'm rushing a little bit, because I wanted to have this painting done. I was getting very excited for the next step, and the pencils just fall out of my hands a lot. So a few little last details, and then I'm going in for that glow. So normally I would have left a little space around the lantern that was a little bit lighter, just to accommodate that yellow colored pencil afterwards, and the pastels. But in this case, I didn't do that. I don't know why. I just didn't feel like it. And so, as you can see, the colored pencil's a little bit on the... It's kind of hard to layer it on that dark brown. But it doesn't really bother me because it's... I knew that after I've added the soft pastels and the shadows, the shading around, let's say, the darkness around the picture, it would just make it pop. And if it didn't, I would have added the white details at the end anyway, and that makes everything pop. So, but as you can see here, it actually works really, really nice. I just keep layering very gently because I couldn't really use force for it. Normally I try to really press the powder into the paper, but in this case I couldn't because my camera stand is very... It just wants to move a lot because I don't have a proper one yet for this camera. And so I really had to stop myself from moving too much because, of course, then with the camera, with the movement of my hand, the table would start to shake, the camera would start to shake, and I didn't want to, you guys to have a shaky video. So in the meantime here, I'm starting to add the little frame around the painting. And I've decided to go with the cooler tones for that. Initially, I planned to use brown, and you probably saw me picking the brown from the soft pastels. But in the end, I've decided against that, just to even more pull out the warmth of the lantern. And so the first thing I'm doing here, I'm using the blue to set the place where I want the shadows to be. And then I'm coming in with black on top of that and kind of blending it into the blue very, very, very carefully because black pastel is very powerful and it's very easy to overdo it. It's a pigment, so it's very powerful and you just need a little tiny bit and you can always add more if you have. Better start with less than to have a problem. Also, another thing that you have to remember, especially when you're using a darker pastel like that, to be a little bit more careful not to press too hard at first because sometimes you can get streaks. So that's just my little tip for today. But at this point, I was already absolutely in love with this painting. I can't even tell you how much it always surprises me how paintings can quickly change from that middle point where it's absolutely awful, and at the end I'm completely pleased with what I see. So this painting actually didn't ask for too many white details. I've decided to have them only around the character once again, just because that was the point where the light was the hardest and there was the most light, so I wanted it to be especially just in your face prominent. And here is the finished painting. If you liked this video, please hit the like button, and if you would like to see more, hit the subscribe button. It would mean the world to me. So yeah, thank you so very, very much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!